Hi, my name is Vincent, and welcome back to Southside Korero. I'm going to just give a short, brief introduction to the person that we had an interview with, Judy and Will. His name is Josh. He has an amazing peripheral of information and knowledge about his Talofa Southsiders, his well-being, his everything about him. His family and what he does is just it's an awesome episode. I can't describe it anymore. I would rather prefer you watch it. Southside Korero again. Josh, the floor is yours. I hope you enjoy the episode. Kia ora. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to Southside Korero. My name, of course, is Vincent Vitellino. I'm with an amazing peripheral of people. I learned that word just today. Peripheral of people. So we in the smorgasbord. We have amazing co-host Judy Spates. Say hello, Judy Spates.
Hello, Fano. Thank you for watching this podcast, and we're looking forward to having a good time.
I'm just saying that you look like a different jar. You look. I can see the resemblance. Oh, perfect, awesome. And then we got another amazing co-host that joined us 2 episodes ago. Will Fleming, say hello.
I love that word, peripheral. Is it? We've got peripheral for the peripheral. Hello, everyone. I'm very stoked to be here today.
It's all. Oh, by the way, you're rocking out that Star Wars T-shirt. Magnifique.
I ain't going changing on you, Vincent. I'm changing.
Yeah, beautiful. And then we're finally coming to the grand piece of resistance. We have our amazing guest. I heard is the #1 bush tracker of New Zealand, as well as Ironman champion of Otara. I'm reading my notes from cousin Judy, so I'm reading it off. So say hello, Josh. Say hello to everyone.
Ngā mihi koutou, whānau mā. Thank you for having me, Vincent, Judith, and Will. I'm not too sure how it's going to go, but I'm going to just roll with it.
That's normally the go-to of these podcasts. We just roll with the flow, as everyone does, and we just have fun. That's the most important thing of it. So, Josh, for those who are listening, or even watching this podcast, can you please go ahead and introduce yourself? Go through the amazing things that you've done so far throughout your life.
Tēnei te mihi o koutou e whānau. He mani haupu ki kārere. Ko waiau, ko hauti iki o Otara, ta maunga, ko tōwai ta aua, ko Ngāti Kahu te iwi, ko Ngāti Kauau, Ngāti Kaitangata, ngā hapū, ko Marara Tupe, te wahine toa, ko Karanga Hapi te wharehui, ko Matangirau te marae, ko Whaingaroa te moana kiwa, ko Miriana Tangihia Ngāhu Pōata Rewhi tōku māma, ko Hohua Hau. Greetings everybody, my name's Josh. Come from the far north, from a little settlement called Matangirau. My mum, born and bred there, brought up on the marae there. I spent most of my childhood and the early part of my teenage years growing up in the north. And so I have a very rural perspective about life. In saying that, I've acclimatised to being an urban Māori as well. I want to just do a bit of a shout out to my cousin Judith. So we're related. Her Shepherd and Hayes whānau. First cousins on my whakapapa side, which is my mum's side. So her family was first settlers actually in that part of the north. And So we've kept a really close relationship with each other for many years now. So it was at her beckoning that I respond out of that whole space of whanaungatanga, because that's what I've been taught to do. So, ngā mihi koutou e whānau. I said a little whakatauki there, he mani haupiki kārere, that it means the new bird takes flight. And it was a whakatauki that was given to me by a tōhunga moko, a tattoo artist from Tūhoi. His name was Tim Worrell. And he actually did that moko, so I've got that actually tattooed on me. And I'd like to talk just quickly about the importance of this whakatauki and what it means to me, having been brought up here in Tamaki Makaurau. And so the whakatauki, he mani haupiki kāre, the new bird takes flight. And so it's the idea of the bird leaving its nest. And the nest, for me, the kohanga for me was in the north. And having to fly to a new environment, which is Tamaki Makaurau. And in the process of coming here to Auckland, I realised just how rich and how important it was for me to bring the mātauranga, the knowledge of how I grew up in the north here to an urban context in order to survive here. And I've never I've tried really hard to stay true to that. So that's a little bit about my whakapapa. Come from the north, whakapapa back 9 generations on my mum's side, all the way back to Hungihika. Actually Hungihika's mother, Turakari Hika, is actually my great-grandmother 8 generations back. So if you look at the characters in that whakapapa, they're actually quite lively people, quite very dynamic, very active, and very assertive. And I've inherited those traits. So yeah, and then, I'm going to try and just kind of contextualize my life here in Auckland now. So I'm married. I got 2 lovely children, got 1 moko. My eldest, my boy, he's finishing his sociology master's thing or something or other at university. Don't quite understand it. I think he went there to try and work his dad out. And my daughter is the art teacher at De La Salle College. My wife, she manages a dental clinic in Glenmead Intermediate School. And I'm currently a senior manager for TAPA. And TAPA is an organisation that works in the social service reintegration sector. So we look after all the domestic prisoners coming out of prison, and also all the deportees and 501s coming back into New Zealand. Majority of which are our people. So it's a huge organisation. We're the preferred service provider in that whole reintegration space in New Zealand. And my role there at the moment is, they gave me this flash-ass name, Insights and Enhancement Senior Manager. After 12 months, I've just figured out what it means. So that's what I do to earn my bread during the day. I'm also on the board for the Amoarangi of the Whare Amoarangi of Laidlaw College, which is a theological college out in Henderson. So I'm on the Māori Council there, and also on the board for Pacific Vision Aotearoa as well. And what do I do for a hobby? I'm a principal instructor in martial arts, actually, at a dojo down in Sandringham. So I've been in the martial arts space for about 35 years now. And it's been good to me. It's been taking me around the world. So I met some fantastic people. So I'm very, very fortunate. What else? I know a little bit about the bush. Know where to go and when to go and all this business. And that's because of my relationship with Kaumata from West Auckland here, Gerald Ngawati, who passed away in 2010. So he taught me mauraku, mai taiaha, just me and him in the bush for years. And then also I've also had relationships with other significant kaumātua around the motu, tohunga like Hohepe Delamere. It's a very well-known name. Wārihi Paki and his wife Linda, Matua Seth Barrett. All these people I name because they have been instrumental in me staying true to tikanga Māori. And it would be a miss of me to introduce myself without talking about them. That's a real old tikanga way of doing things. You acknowledge yourself through the others that are either here or have gone before you. We don't actually, and I mean, it's a sad indictment on how our Māori worldview has been watered down, is that we don't see a lot of that today. So I'm just a small voice in a big world trying to maintain the integrity and authenticity of being Māori and how I've been brought up as well. What else? What about me? I love to read. I love to research. I'm finishing off a theology thing at the moment at Laidlaw. People kind of get a little bit freaky when I tell them about that. They go, what? I says, yeah, but you see, in Tau Māori, that whole Wairuatanga space is actually about theology.
I mean, it's the people that actually know you that wonder how you ended up there.
Yeah. So, and it's just my appetite that I have for knowledge. And I just love learning as much as I possibly can. And that's not to make me smarter, but it's actually, once you acquire knowledge, you have a responsibility to pass it back on. We see that in all our mythological stories in Tau Māori. And Tāne went to the 12th heaven to get knowledge. What did he do? Didn't stay up there. He came back. And they wanted to lock away that body of knowledge. What did he do? He gave it to the people. And so, I mean, there's patterns for everything. For our life, for our world, and it can be found in our, the pūrākua, the paki kōrero, the roots of our stories. And so I love what you said before, Vincent, about, wanting to capture the story of people. And Māori and Pacifica people, their literacy is actually in stories. They're great storytellers. Yeah. And so, I love that whole space, being able to just share and tell stories. I've got a few to tell about Judith.
Oh, awesome! We want to hear about that.
Let's go live.
That's awesome.
I would say that story thing was something that we were talking about before we put the recordings on. Was that Josh gave me my pity heart, even though I always knew that we came from that space and, I visited since I was a child and my children had, and my mother had, and my mother, and my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. But we've been robbed of some of our history. And Josh explained it to me through stories, and I probably can't do it without crying, but talking about our ancestry, Ngāti Karo, Ngāti Kahu. And I remember standing on the beach with him. Probably wasn't at dawn, but in my heart it was at dawn. And he explained to me the flight of the Karo. And, this is where our people start, and this is where our people finish on this coastline. And I've told my children about that, and it's very, very meaningful. And here she is at 30 minutes crying already. Over to you. Absolutely. I just wanted, the story thing is so powerful because it runs in your veins.
Yeah,
absolutely. It goes back to most of our ancestors. I want, if you don't mind me sharing, like my Pacific heritage, my Far Samoa way, where we have the meeting house where you have the matai, the chief, and then has the villagers who gather around in the little hut, and with the matai who speaks his words, not to command but to say the stories of our people and share it, so a generation, the next generation, who's the next matai, will speak the same words. It even though it's a different setting, because I love the fact that you linked both rural and urban life, Josh. When I heard that, I was like, beautiful. That was a beautiful thing to say, because even in the urban settings, you still have those little pockets and cities for Samoans, and for those who are still following the Far Samoa way, who are gathering into garages and halls, and they still speak those stories, and it's beautiful. Just hearing Judy share her story, it's the nature of it. Is the knowledge that's always well encapsulated, and it's always preserved. It's not a physical thing. It's a word of mouth thing. It's like the breath of life. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Just to wedge in here, brother.
Yep.
And I think that maybe here's an opportunity to breathe life and expose those pockets of knowledge more. Because I think what we've tended to do is actually we've leaned too hard into institutions that often determine, whether or not our culture is alive. And then someone turns it into a research project, and someone gets a whole lot of money to actually find out whether or not, tikunga's still alive. And all. But in actual fact, I think you're right. There's pockets of knowledge that exist all over the place. And that we need to start tapping those things more. I've got a friend who's a researcher, Brad Harm. He's written a number of books, actually. He wrote a book. I don't know whether you can see this.
Yep, we can see it.
Urban Māori. So he was commissioned by the Whānau Waiparator to write the book about urban Māori. And that it's become a number one seller for a lot of researchers in that whole urban Māori space. And the interesting thing about talking to Brad about it was actually how he went around and actually interviewed and got stories from people. And it's really interesting that a whole lot of information in those stories don't actually exist in the research literature. Things like how did Starship get its name? There are a lot of people like, I don't know, it was some Palingi person on a proposal put it there. Well, no, actually it was a little Māori boy that hopped in a lift with an old queer who was a nurse. And they had just finished building that whole complex, and the old queer said to this little boy, and he says, if you were to call this something, what would you call it? I said, Starship. How many people know that story?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. How many people
didn't know that?
Yeah, it's amazing. But see, you won't find that unless you go to those little pockets, who are the knowledge holders of truth. And, I'll give you another good example of storytelling. with your Samoan heritage. Do you know the name of the Samoan high priest that came to here on Takitimi Waka?
No, I don't. See, I have not been told this, as you well aware. A lot of our Pacific Islanders who come in the early 60s, 70s were told,
Yeah,
this is not right. You do the, sorry if I go in depth into it, but you do the Palangi way, or there's nothing, because they meet up with because this is my story of my mother and my father. They met with a Catholic priest in Glen Innes.
Yeah.
And they were taught by church and whatnot, which is how it is. And then they were changed, slowly changed into the Whāpālangi way, and they slowly lost their way. They didn't know their own heritage until there was a resurgence from those who come from the islands, like cousins and whatnot, to remind them, like, hey, look, you were from the islands. This is the Whā Samoa way. We should keep the traditions up. So my parents didn't keep that up, and I was kept in the dark because I didn't know this until 20 plus years later. I'm finding books and slowly building up pieces, and I'm talking to the other side of the family, which is my dad's side of the family, who's kept up with the Whā Samoa way and learning things.
I think that's quite a nice segue too into that. Why are we doing these conversations? The conversations are about protecting our history, protecting our past. I can do a whakatauki as well. There's a lovely whakatauki that talks about if you know where you come from, then you know where you're going, and you know who you are. And that sums it up, doesn't it? I mean, how can we possibly know our direction in life if we don't know where we come from, where you stand? And I love the fact that you talk about recapturing that, Vinnie, all the time. And for me, that's my story too. I mean, Josh has given me, he extended his hand and said, "Come with me."
Yeah, and you're right, Judith. I mean, we're working with a whole lot of, at the moment, I'm kind of bouncing around here. We're working with a whole lot of people coming back from Australia. So they're being deported back here to New Zealand, right? And some of the reasons are just so ridiculous. It's just unbelievable. However, they arrive here, and we have an obligation. We have a responsibility as tangata whenua to ensure that they don't relapse into the same experiences they've had whilst they're leaving their country that they've been in for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And so one of the key activities that we're involved in at the moment is the whole thing called tuakiritanga. And that's actually about identity. Who are you? Can I give you a really quick story? There's a boy that I'm talking to tomorrow. So his kaiawhina, his support worker, rings me and says, "Bro, I've got this fella. He got off the plane a month ago. Okay, I just dropped him here in New Zealand." And literally, that's what they do. They just drop you. The police and the Department of Corrections get involved, the police get involved, and we get involved straight away. Once we're on the tarmac, we're there. And so I got a conversation with this boy, and I says to this kaimahi, this worker, I said, "So what would you like me to do?" He says, "Well, he's just here. He's got no one." And I said, "What's his whānau name?" So she tells me the whānau name. And I said, "You know that he's got a whole community of people in a place called Ahipara in the far north." And so when she told him that, he broke down and cried. Because, you see, he thought he was here by himself. And that the world had given up on him. And he actually didn't even know the significance of his family name. And so I'm talking to him tomorrow. I'm going to talk to him about, because like he's into his fitness, he wanted to get into the military and all this business. So I'm going to talk to him tomorrow about, you've actually got two uncles who fought in the 28th Māori Battalion in the A Company. and they were war heroes. You know, and so identity is such a huge, huge thing. And again, I'll go back to my previous comment, is that I think we've linked too much into the experts, the so-called experts, to give us direction and guidance on all this stuff. Well, actually, the answer sits in those small pockets of people. Now, whether they're sitting in a community centre or on a marae, or they're sitting in Wānanga because they don't want to have nothing to do with the Pākehā world, you know, and those places need to be tapped more. And so I'm talking to this boy tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to get him in a car when the borders open, and we'll take him home, right? And then I know my job's done because his people will look after him. So tuakiritanga is, that's about identity. And the use of whakapapa in tuakiritanga is actually about understanding that there are other people in history just like you, and that you have inherited their traits, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah, it's what you do with it now that matters.
Absolutely.
So that's a real tau Māori tikanga way of doing it. It's held us in a good place for millennia. Now, why we got sucked into thinking that someone else has an answer for us? You know, that's, for me, that's the epitome of colonisation. Is where we can get stripped of our own mātauranga, and then we will replace it with somebody else that has no bearing on our worldview. And then we begin hating our own. I just, for me, I can't fathom that. So that's a good point to raise there, Vince. You know, identity is a really big key issue, and it continues to be. That high priest from Samoa hitched a ride here in the Waka Takitimi, and he became actually quite instrumental in establishing this whole worldview of eo here in Aotearoa, because eo was a common phrase used throughout the Pacific. There's a whole lot of stuff, you know, the hongi, you know, people who associate the hongi belonging to Māori actually didn't actually belong to the Pacific. All the Pacific nations were hongi. So we've lost a lot of those old ancient knowledge. My role for as long as whatever time I've got left, I don't know, another 2 years or something, is to whoever wants to have access to that body of knowledge, right? And I often talk to my tuakana, my older brother, about this, and he comes from the old school where he is so protective of it, it goes nowhere. You know, and I said, bro, what's the point of that? And so I'll give you a quick example. So for the last 15 years, I've been sitting with him, learning about our whakapapa. It's taken 15 years. In actual fact, it's only taken 5 years. The first 10 years was earning his trust. But that's the cost. That's the cost you pay. Absolutely. If you so firmly believe, actually, we are people of such rich, sophisticated, complex bodies of knowledge. And if that's what I have to do, then that's what I do. And so in the last 5 years, only been the last 5 years, he's actually opened it up and being able to actually discover things that I know for a fact the researchers will never, ever find out. And yet, you know, because he is the knowledge holder of our hapu in Matangiro. All those kaumata and koe on that marae at Karanga Happy Judith, they only talk to him, no one else.
That's cool.
And so when he goes, hopefully I've managed to glean enough to keep the legacy going. I can remember the first time, and I said, "Oh, hang on, bro, I was going to get my pen and paper." And I went out to the car and he locked the door. So I'm knocking on the door going, "Bro, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Don't you bring that rubbish in here." And, and I went, "Oh, yeah." Because it's an oral tradition. You memorize all of it. So I've had to do that. And it's only been in recent times that he's allowed me to actually start writing things. So that little piece that I gave you, Judith, so I actually got to make some corrections to that.
Never shown it to anyone, you promised.
Yeah.
Promise not to.
Yeah. So I've got to make some corrections to that because there's a couple of things in there that I need to actually correct, and it's about our connection to that whole realm of tohunga. Because there's 4 people in their whakapapa who are actual tohunga. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, and his father, and an auntie. Which makes sense. It makes sense because when I look at when I connect and look at you, I think, yeah, that makes sense because of the way that you process the world and process your environment and all those around you is exactly how these people operated. And so I guess my point is that, again, stop leaning into the experts, the so-called institutional experts, just because they got a title and a bit of research behind them, right? It's actually come back and say, actually, how did our tupuna survive for 1,000 years in their absence?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I could go on.
No, it's beautiful.
No, that's all right.
It's beautiful,
That's
Josh.
awesome.
Josh, I have a question, if you don't mind the newbie here asking. We live, I think everything you're saying is even the timeline, 10 years to earn trust, I think that sounds fair. It's just when you put it under the measurement of modern society, that's where the trouble comes, because is there a way we can kind of blend what is required of us in this, 40-hour work week with keeping enough of that actual true investment, that 10-year investment, to even bring the pen in?
Yes. So I've just come I did a big presentation this morning to all our senior managers around exactly this. And it actually it pertains to the question you're asking. Mm. How do we maintain the authenticity of things Māori and Pacific when we're actually having to contend with the Pākehā Pālangi world? And the Pākehā Pālangi world says that you've got to work your 40 hours, you get X amount of dollars for doing that. So here's a role in the title. Follow the systems and the process we put in place. Mm. And the contention is, and go, well, actually, that's not going to work for our people. So what do you lean into? So do you bite the hand that feeds you? You chop it off. We're very fortunate at my organisation, Te Pā, is that I've helped shape a kaupapa Māori organisation. And so everything that we do is actually through the lens of being Māori and Pacific. Now, so some of the examples of that is that, whilst you might, in a Pālangi system, say that the health and well-being of your workers is really important to us as a company, right? And so they said you can have access to things like, what's that thing, an employment assistance program, the EAP. And you might be stressing out, you've got things going on, so they refer you. Get that? Now, here's the thing. They refer you to an external body of knowledge that supposedly are the experts for you. And from a Tau Māori point of view, we don't do that. Why? Because the value of whanaungatanga says we don't refer out. We look after our own. And so we've established that whole dynamic in our organisation. We don't refer people out. We look internally. And we look for the expertise that already exists internally. There may be some cases, extreme cases, where we might do that. But, that's generally, that's not a rule. We look internally. We value that whole feature or whanaungatanga, and this is one of the ways that it turns up, is how we look after our own. There's the value of manaakitanga. A lot of people say, the English translation for manaakitanga does not do the word justice at all. It talks about being a good host and blah, blah, blah. Actually, manaakitanga is actually the whole concept of the manaakitanga involves leadership, that you lead out on being the best host you can possibly be. Otherwise I can say I just gave a cup of tea and that's manaakitanga. I still hate the guy. You know what I'm saying? I says, well, the true essence of manaakitanga would never ever allow you to do that. Because it says you have to lead out in service to will. Right? The whole concept around aroha. It's, again, the English translation love. I mean, even in the Greek interpretation of the word love, they've got different meanings for it. And yet the answer on how to clearly define aroha is already written in the word. The aro and the ha. The aro means to lie beside each other, to face each other, and to share each other's breath. That's where you get the ha. That's the actual meaning of aroha. You can't, my auntie used to say to me, says you can never ever extend aroha from distance. Turn up. Because, and it took me years to work out why, and it's actually the answer's in the word. Because you need to be beside each other, to see each other, to actually feel each other's breath. Yeah.
Josh, I don't mean to jump in, but can you explain that in this modern context of COVID, where we're not even allowed to share a breath in person? That's a hard one, eh? It's this whole pandemic has forced everybody to rethink some sacred cows, to rethink a lot of our tikanga. But in saying that, we've done it before. So, we can go back to the Spanish flu pandemic, where I think it was about 2,500, 3,000 Māori were gone in one go. Well, and actually, in the islands, it was actually double that. It was actually nearly triple that, actually. So we've been through these kinds of things before. But when we look at the whole landscape of history in which we have asked our people to survive, and I think about, from the start of the last century through to where we are today, it almost feels like history hasn't given us the opportunity to pause and to breathe. There's always something happening. Yeah. So we can go from that whole pandemic into a global recession, into a world war. We come to that, we've got this little moment, then all of a sudden we're going to World War II, then we're going through the post-war era, then we're coming into the whole migration, into our urban centres, and we have to rediscover life again. So it almost feels like
we've had to adapt all the time. Personally, I don't think that this is any different. Is that we just have to learn to adapt. Yep, it's hard, but then I take a lead from my uncles and aunties up home. So I got an email from my cousin. I don't know whether you fellas know him, Hami Piripi. So he's the chairperson for Talofa. Now, he wrote this big blog on Facebook about the importance of, he said, all our practices, he said, our tikanga is what we create to respond to our environment. He said that we've got to stop treating it as something so sacrosanct we can't change it. And so, and that's absolutely true. If we created it, we can adapt it. And so, and you see that play out in Māori history all the time, is that they've had to readjust tikanga in order to respond effectively to what's going on around them. And it happens all the time. And this is just another one of those times. We can adjust our tikanga to actually meet the current crisis. When that blows over, we can go back. So it's not like something we could give up forever and it's gone into eternity somewhere. But for the moment, let's actually just focus on what we need to adjust in order to get through this so that whakapapa survives. And I think there's probably a missing point. There's a missing part in that whole narrative that's, it's been plastered all over the place, is that actually, we can make the adjustments of tikanga in order for whakapapa to survive, and then we can actually go back to old tikanga practices, okay, and reassume the way we would normally behave, but in the process of both, we have preserved whakapapa. And for me, that makes sense. People have a different opinion about that. And in kei te pai, I totally get that. To be vaxxed or not to be vaxxed, for me, that's a moot point. The most important thing is what am I doing to preserve whakapapa? I think there's too much division that's created around this whole thing.
Absolutely.
Agree. Just you tend to forget your core values. You tend to forget that the first important thing in life, besides vaccine and unvaccinated, is that you're human.
Yep.
The squishy part that's right here is you. You're human, and no matter what you have a decision on or what you think it is, the people in front of you is human too, and they're acceptable to every form of what your words are going to say and what you say to them. And your actions are going to be amplified as twice as hard, because what you do, what you decide to do, will not only echo the people in front of you, will be echoing the people behind them. They'll be like, oh, this person is doing this. This is, what? Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have an opinion for it, or do I just ignore it? So coming back to the core, go back to you. What do I need? What's what the people in my circle need? And it, again, the whakapapa, the whole, it's the essential core of you is in there. So yeah.
Yeah, I take, and pai tēnā te kōrero e hoa, can I say this about the essence of being and how
Absolutely.
I've grown up? The essence of being me is birthed out of Wairua. And I grew up believing, and I know, and I shared this morning with all our managers, because in that whole Tau Māori world space, we often have a reference to wairuatanga, but then we don't go anywhere near it, you know? I go, why? I was just, oh, well, it's not everyone's cup of tea. Well, maybe they should be drinking coffee. And because in the realm of wairuatanga is where Māori are birthed out of. Therefore, our language, our words, our behaviour, everything comes from that worldview. From that whole spiritual realm comes that whole essence of being Māori. How do I know this? You cannot go to a hui or a meeting in which Māori gather and they open every meeting with a what? Karakia. Why? What Māori are declaring is their core essence of being comes from that spiritual realm. And so they maintain connection with it every single time. The fact that our language is actually saturated with concepts of wairua tells you also. So that whole thing about whether I'm vaxxed or not, for me is a moot thing. If I was to behave out of the core of my being as Māori, which is actually is birthed out of wairua, then my responsibility, my obligation is to actually help the person in front of me behave in the same way. And so, that whole wairuatanga space, it's a real deep thing to kind of jump into. We have this thing called rumake. It's a deep dive. But that appears to be becoming more prominent in secular environments. And so a lot of Māori are reverting back to that space where they're declaring that we are spiritual people on a physical journey. And so, that's I just wanted to comment, on what you just said there, Vince, and how I see it.
It also is kind of beautiful because it's not about telling you what to do. It's exactly. Like it's kind of really scientific, because the one thing I went on this master's journey, and I'm out of it now because it's too much. I've got a family and I've got to keep some money rolling in for now. But I said to the professor who's mentoring me, wait, you're telling me all the studies we're going to do don't tell me what to do. They just tell me what's going on, and I have to make an informed decision. And it was too much for me to handle because I hadn't thought about it like that. And that's exactly what you just laid out.
Yeah.
It's kind of beautiful. You got to make the decision based on all the information.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that goes back to your point you made earlier too, Josh, was that, let's not just listen to the experts. Let's put these things into a realm where it makes sense and where we can understand it from a historical perspective, and where we can own it. So, too. And as I explained to our colleague Jar, she wasn't getting vexed because no one had told her why she should. She didn't understand.
Yeah.
Once she understood, it was a no-brainer. But she used her cultural perspective on what that would mean for her and how it could make meaning, rather than being blah, blah, blah on the television.
Yeah.
We missed the whole thing. And then the experts say, why are young Māori in Pacifica not listening to what we're telling them? Because it was never made relevant.
I think that, from my observation on that, Judith, is you're absolutely right, hey? I was anti-vax. And it's not because I hated anybody or anything like that. It's just I didn't understand the science.
Mm.
Right? So, and again, information. All I got bombarded with, get vaxxed. What for? There's a virus. How did that happen? Blah, blah, blah. And so what I wanted was actually, what's the science behind all this? And then I got a little bit dissatisfied with that. I got dissatisfied with institutional answers. And then I just went straight back into Te Māori.
Mm.
And then I started thinking about my kaumata, my queer, and our karaua, and our hapu, and our iwi up north. And I'm going, holy crap. If we don't do something, our whakapapa could end tomorrow. And that's what convinced me. For me, it wasn't now about the science. It was actually about the people. And I'm so intrinsically linked to those people. I didn't want to be responsible for causing the tsunami. And I said, because then our whakapapa's gone, you put a full stop right at the end of that sentence. And I said, I didn't want to go anywhere near that. And then that's one thing. The other thing, too, I think the media is doing such a shocking job around actually, when's the last time you saw some really good news around what's actually happening with vaccination with Māori and Pacific people on mainstream TV? Yeah. You're going to go to Māori television or somewhere else and flip and see it. How many people know that Te Whānau Waiparere have just got back here in Auckland this week after doing a hikoi in the north to help out with the vaccination process up there? How many people know that?
Mm.
Do we see that on TV? No. You see the one or two shots of whānau of Waiparere, Henderson, and the imagery you get is that, they don't even look like they're vaccinating. Look, they're dancing in the car park. Right? Or they're singing a song. Or they're gathered, at 6 o'clock in the morning and somebody's doing a karakia. And so, and a lot of those imagery actually creates an idea about things Māori and Pacific. And so when people start feeding the narrative, that they're not getting vaccinated, immediately they start latching on to those images. Well, that's because, they're not even taking it serious because they're playing songs and the blooming thing. Well, no, that was actually a waiata that followed that followed a karakia to start the day for vaccination.
Yeah.
Because that's our tikanga. That's our process. So we need to be seeing that, the mainstream media needs to actually have more coverage around this stuff. Because then I think that, rangatahi would actually, again, it comes back to, because there's social media savvy anyway, and let those good news stories release the power that they have to inform young people. I just find it really disappointing.
Us too, which is why we wanted to start this, where it's like, we'll let you speak however you want and we'll all enjoy it and we'll archive it for 100 years from now.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's how I want to use technology. And it can stay forever. It's not like a 2-minute news story. And it's so the obviously it's a big thing for us at work, given that we're essential service, so things don't shut down for us over the lockdown. I do know that the mental stress of it all is another layer of concern over and above the issues people are already facing. What I think about homelessness, right? And then we put the layer of affordability, which is, your quality of life on top of that. And then we put on top of that COVID-19. Then we put on top of that lockdown.
and then we put on top of that, we have to actually live for the next 3 months of a subsidy grant from the government because my boss can't pay me, and so these layers just get really, really thick. And so in a Tau Māori worldview, when we talk about stress, we don't use the word stress, we talk about whakamā, the hakamā or whakamā. And it's actually the way that's it's the old way that it's used is actually that layering effect. Layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of challenges to the point where it gets so top heavy, everything implodes, it collapses down. And if you happen to be on the bottom of that, that's what will destroy you. And so that's the old concept of whakamā. Is actually it's layer upon layer to the point where it gets so top heavy, it implodes and it drops on top of you and it crushes you. And that's where depression sets in. So, and so it's being able to actually, and people say, oh, we'll just go and deal with the depression. You can't. You got to deal with each individual layer to lighten the load. Hence the reason why, what is the first thing a lot of our Māori Pacific communities do when lockdown was put into effect? They open up food banks. Why is that? You see, that's one of the layers of concern Whānau would have. Can I feed my kids? Take that layer away from them.
See, all through level 4, we were delivering, meals and food to the community.
Yeah. Take that layer of concern away. Lighten the load.
Yeah.
Petrol vouchers. How do I get to work? And take that layer of concern away. Lighten the load. So in that whole Tau Māori world, we already have an idea, a concept, a belief about these things, and it's caught up in that word whakamā. When we're talking about mental health, the hau hongorongo or the hau oranga o te hingingaro, the mental health of the mind, which is interesting because the Pākehā translation of the word hingingaro means, hine means woman, ngaro means to be empty. And this is the empty mind of the woman. Well, actually, it means the lost psyche of the woman. And you think about that, is that the female is, well, at least in a Tau Māori worldview, the female is the foundation upon which everything else is built. And so the female is the character that nurtures life. And if our mind is not being fed the right thing, okay, then yeah, of course, we're going to go crazy. I don't know whether you heard of, sorry, forgive me if I'm talking out of line here. There's a Māori word that describes trying to regain balance of the mind and of the emotions. And it's a word, it's haurangi. You may have heard of that word used from haurangi. English translation, they say it means to be drunk. All right? I said, oh, that fellow there is haurangi. He's drunk. Until you ask some of our old people, and they go, well, no. And the answer's in the word. Haurangi. Hau mean wind. Rangi, the sky. Well, how could that possibly mean to be drunk? And the idea is actually of a person standing in a waka in the middle of a storm. And the wind is blowing and he or she's trying to regain balance because he's being blown about in the waka. That's the haurangi. Right? And so that person's trying to regain a sense of balance so that they can navigate out of the storm. And so when we talk about mental health, we're talking about helping people to regain their balance so they can actually navigate themselves out of the crisis.
Wow.
See, and we've got the answers.
Yeah.
We've got the answers of what's the Palangi response. Oh, we'll put them on medication. Well, why? Or because then they become someone else's problem.
An expert.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so, I mean, I don't want to really I sound like I'm really dishing them today, and I am. But what I'm saying is that a lot of our contemporary challenges that we face now, whether it be COVID-19, mental health, whatever, is that our tupuna, our ancestors have already faced those things. And they've created a body of knowledge that navigated themselves out of it. And that body of knowledge is still with us today, and you will find them where? In those little pockets all over the place. It'd be awesome to actually try and do a mobile podcast and find a dozen of those pockets and go and sit with them.
Get on the
Just
road
talk.
And just talk. Kalanoa, you know? Let them tell the stories.
Yep.
And then glean from the stories the answers that we can say, well, there's our clinical therapy right there.
That's right. Yeah. To say, instead of giving you 2 tablets, give you 2 earbuds and listen to this.
Exactly. You know, I'm working with one of our Mohiri. He was a patch Black Power member, and I'd been in the gangs for years. He was in prison, come out, and about 5 years ago, he was getting support from the Salvation Army, and I met him. We met him earlier this year, and then we decided that we'll give this guy a go, and we decided to hire him to actually be part of our rangatahi services at work. Well, he was an awesome man. He was awesome, right? And then, but he's still working through things. Yep. And then one day he comes into my office and he says, bro, and he just had this massive meltdown. And I said, what's going on? I says, this is that. I just realised, well, you fellas got all these qualifications and, you got this blah, blah, blah. And I says, and I've got nothing. And so I sat and I let him finish. And then a couple of weeks ago, him and I were talking and I says, bro, when you came in my office and you said this and the other, have you ever considered that maybe you are the qualification? And he went, what? And I says that you are the qualification. You are the reason why people like us got a piece of paper. And the thing about the piece of paper, there's no life in it. It's like a memorial I can stick up on my wall. But you are the qualification. And being able to actually say that our tupuna were able to qualify who they are because of whakapapa, because of tikanga, because of mātauranga Māori, all those sorts of things. None of that stuff was written. Therefore, you are the qualification. Change everything. And I was thinking, well, how many times? He goes, well, I've been going to a psychologist for fucking see. We're leaning into the expert. The answer sits in our own bodies of knowledge. Yeah, and so that's me. I'm on that waka. I have been for a long time. Judith knows this, and I'll stay there. Yep, I train in all those park institutions. I got that degree and got this blah, blah, blah. Do I ever use it? Hardly. Does it make sense to me? No, not a lot of the time. Does it make me smart? Maybe. Give me information? Absolutely.
Get you a job? Maybe.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that I'm very passionate about. It's I'm glad you guys are thinking of doing this sort of thing, because we don't actually have enough of that. We're just
Please, the goal is to have this studio or this digital waka, right? And please come and do korero for you and others and capture those stories. And, it's like, be so cool.
Well, it's a bit like what's stopping you guys from creating your own Māori Pacifica TED Talks thing? Right? And it's actually birthed out of Wairua. It's actually the kaupapa is actually grounded in our bodies of knowledge.
Mm.
But I can tell you straight out, people will flock to it. They'll jump on that waka.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel that, in the last 5 years, I've really sensed this turning of a corner for Māori. And there's a lot of things working in our favour right now. And we got to capture the edge of it and stay on the edge of it. And I think that's an awesome thing. And, and once we get given back our own, we have the responsibility to carry it forward. We have the responsibility to champion it forward, right? Because we've tried this system for so long now, and all it's done is just it's left a bitter taste in our mouth. For some of our whānau, all it ended up doing was shining their shackles. And so, you give us the responsibility back, and we will actually move our people forward in the ways that we know works. I work, I shouldn't say this actually, I'll give it away because I might get hammered again. This is me leaning into that parking. There's a big agency, a government agency, that I know of. And they have operated in a certain way for the last 100 years. And interesting enough is that as much as they espouse things Māori Pacific, the root of what they do is no different from how they operated 100 years ago. And so I'm saying, well, maybe we just need to pluck their heart out and do a transplant. And I think, there's a lot of, and I think this is actually, and for all the people in this country who are currently really threatened by this. And it's interesting, isn't it? This is that I've noticed in the last 2 years, there's just the level of racism that we're seeing through social media, maybe whatever, is just quite, it's like a boiling point. And I'm thinking, the fellas are always there. You stay quiet as long as, it doesn't offend you, or actually you're just going to keep all those Māori Pacific people in their place. Don't give them any power because we can't trust them. See, all that's starting to flip.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden you see this rising of all this racist rhetoric that's been there. And that's the sort of stuff we want to stamp out.
Absolutely. It's you, and I hope if you don't mind me sharing this, it's like painting a picture. You paint a certain section of a picture, and you let people see that section of the picture, and people don't understand what that section of the picture is. When you complete the picture, people will slowly understand it. If I feel like in sections of a painting, when you view it, it has different meanings to certain people who view it. And our culture as a painting, not many people understand it. And we're slowly understanding sections of what each part of this painting means. And I hope in my generation, in my situation, and that we learn our own painting of our culture, and it becomes clearer for us, so we can carry it on for those behind us and for those in front of us to go. We've done the job. We've done a job that you have tried so many years for us to see, and it goes to the next thing I want to lead on to, because I see the time and you're a very busy gentleman. What picture do you want us to see in terms of this negativity? We don't want to see this negativity, but what beautiful picture? You're an artist. You're God's beautiful painting, his painting imagery and whatnot. What do you want to paint a picture up for those who are out there who are looking to see some hope?
I don't know whether you can see this. So one of my hobbies is that I do a lot of art.
Yeah.
So as much as I try to articulate myself, I also use the language of art.
Awesome.
So I don't know whether you can see this.
Whoa. Wow. That's cool, man.
So actually that's the front of a waka, so that's what we call the tau iho, the front part of the waka. And the end part is the tau rapa, right? And so what you're seeing there, I'm trying to see this part here where the head is, that part there, that's about leadership. I believe that in the coming months we're going to need some very, very strong, rigorous, robust leadership to lead us out of this space. Leadership who's not afraid to face into the crisis, who's not afraid to have answers ready for the challenges in front of us. So that actually requires a very staunch type of person, a person who is so firmly connected to what matters, which is our people, that they are there on their behalf. And that leadership style, that leadership type will actually fluctuate between transactional leadership and transformative leadership. What do I mean by that? Transactional leadership is actually how you operate in a taha Pākehā world. In order to have transformative leadership in Te Ao Māori or Te Ao Pacifica world. Okay, so that's that first part. If we see, I'll try and put my finger on it. This one here is that whoever's leading out the front, we also need the leaders behind them. And they have to be equally committed. They have to be equally as robust and rigorous. They're the people that actually mobilize the people. They're all your community workers. They're all your youth workers, your social workers. They're all your kai awhina, the kai mahi, the kai whakahaere. They're all those people. Those people who are actually on the front line working with our communities. They too need to be just as rigorous and robust in their approach and their extension of leadership to our communities of people. So we've got those who are prepared to face the wind and the storm. Then we've got those who are sheltered behind that type of leadership to actually make sure we're mobilising, bringing in all our communities of people with us. But why? You see that little picture there, that little face there?
Yeah.
Māori have this thing is called Te Ukaipo. Te Ukaipo o te mokoponatanga. Te Ukaipo means actually be birthed out of an identity. And the mokopuna is the manifestation of that, right? So say, for example, my grandson, okay? Ukaipo, he's born out of an identity as Māori. The mokopuna is the manifestation of that to the world. So why are we doing this? Why do we need these types of leadership? So that this mokopuna, these sorts of things, that's whakapapa, It does not die. And so, and we think about the crisis that we're shifting through right now with COVID. You know, that staunch, robust, rigorous leadership who will actually face the crisis and weather the storm of it. And then those behind who can mobilise our communities of people equally as strong, but their role is to mobilise. Why? And lock those two types of leadership in, because our whakapapa is actually nested with a new kaipō mokupunatanga in our children. Right? And so we need to lock those two types of things there to protect that. So that's how I see it. I shared this morning at our managers meeting, because one of the key features of being Māori is actually where we get our knowledge from. And I was brought up to believe that our knowledge is birthed out of Wairuatanga. This picture came out of Wairuatanga and was actually drawn on the 12th of June this year. Who knew that 6 months later we're in lockdown, facing this exact crisis? And funny, the community is saying we need a new type of leadership. Hence, the language of Wairua is also the language that helps me understand the world as it unfolds in front of me. Yeah. So just to answer your question in a really long way, bro.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's like, it goes back to what we said earlier when we started. It's all about making stories. And when we mean by making stories is that we make those stories knowing, it's going back to those pockets, it's making those pockets knowing you're an amazing pocket of knowledge. And I'm not just seeking for it because we want to look for it. I just want to know because it's there for me to pull out and just go, okay, I will put this in my pocket as well. Not only just to put it into my pocket, but to share it into the next future, to the next generation. Again, thank you so much, Josh. Thank you so much for your storytelling and amazing. Your mana, everything about you is beautiful. And thank you for sharing.
Ngā mihi a koutou, te mihi whakamutunga ki a koutou katoa, ko harama nei ki tēnei te korero a waia ki Zui, nō reira, mihi nui ki a koutou, the mihi mahana, the korero, the mihi mana o te mātauranga Māori, o te mātauranga Pasifika, kua huarahi me te wete ngā mātauranga o Pasifika Māori ki o koutou katoa, nō reira, the mihi ki o koutou, te whakaaro, te kōrero, te moimoia me ngā wāwata, me ngā ako anamata, te mea. What I've just said there is actually to keep doing what you're doing for future generations. To keep what you're doing so we continue to add value to our body of knowledge so people can have access to it. Well, and here's the kicker. It's free. In the Palangi world, you got to pay for this. And yet, see, and this tells me something about who we are. Yeah, is that we're so firmly convicted in the core of our being that knowledge actually is a key to our future. And we don't lock it up in an institution and then assign it to a budget sheet and then say you got to pay for it. It's yours by right.
Absolutely. And what a way to end this podcast from Josh to Will to Judy, from myself to your home. Thank you so much. This is Southside Korero. Kia ora.
Matawa.